Ever wondered how pro photographers nail the perfect shot, even in tricky lighting? Today we're diving into a game-changing technique that can instantly elevate your photos. Bracketing on the Nikon Z series cameras. Whether you've been frustrated with uneven exposures or just want to add more depth to your images, stick around. In just a few steps, you'll learn how to set it up, when to use it, and we'll even walk through an example edit in Lightroom that will show you the magic of bracketing. Bracketing in photography is a technique where you take several shots of the same scene, each with different exposure settings. The idea is to capture a range of exposures so that you can choose the best one later or combine them in post-processing for a perfectly balanced image. So this can be especially useful in challenging lighting conditions where it's tough to get the right exposure in a single shot. Through bracketing in the settings, the exposure, flash level, active D lighting, or white balance can all be varied slightly. By bracketing, you ensure that you have options, making it easier to achieve a well-exposed photo with all the details preserved. You'll want to use bracketing in situations where achieving the perfect exposure in one shot is difficult. For example, high-contrast scenes like a sunset, where the bright sky and a dark foreground make it hard to balance. It's also great for HDR photography, where you blend multiple exposures to create an image with a wide dynamic range. If you're shooting landscapes, architecture, or any scene with tricky lighting, bracketing ensures you capture all of the details, allowing for greater flexibility in post-processing. Next, let's take a look at how to set up your Nikon Z series camera for bracketing. But first, if you're passionate about capturing stunning photos and want to stay up to date with the latest in camera gear, shooting techniques, and editing tips, hit that subscribe button now and help me reach my next goal of getting to 5,000 subscribers. Join my community and take your photography skills to the next level with my in-depth reviews and expert advice. Don't miss out and subscribe today. So let's now dive into the auto bracketing settings on my Nikon Z8, which will be very similar to any of the Nikon Z series cameras that you might be using. So when you go into your Nikon Z series camera, what you'll want to do here is go into the menus option, and then you'll go down to the photo shooting menu and you'll want to find the one called auto bracketing. Within this one, the very first option that you have is what your auto bracketing is set to. In this case, I've got it set to auto exposure. However, within here, you can go in and there's 5 total options that you can choose from. The first one being auto exposure and flash bracketing. So this is going to vary both your exposure and your flash so that you can vary your bracket settings. Next up, like I said, I'm set to the auto exposure bracketing, where this is only going to change your exposure setting throughout the series of shots that you take. The next item here is going to be your flash bracketing. So with this option selected, the only thing that's going to change is how bright your flash is. In the next item here, this is going to be your white balance bracketing, where your camera is only going to make slight variations in white balance. However, you're not going to go in and set exposure values. The camera is just automatically going to vary your white balance for you slightly. And the last option here is the active D lighting bracketing, where your camera is just going to vary the active D lighting. So once you have that set, you'll go back here. On the Nikon Z8 and pretty much any of the cameras, this is going to be the way that you do this through the shooting menu. However, I'll note that the Z8 and the Z9 also have an option up here where there's a bracket button that you can switch to, and it'll bring up options to change these using the controls on the camera. So that's just something to be aware of there. But if we're back here and you're going through and making these settings changes, the first one that you're going to set is going to be the number of shots. So what you're telling the camera here is I want to take either 0, so you're basically not using bracketing. I can do 3, 5, 7, or 9. And as you can see there on the bottom, you're going to be able to see how many shots it's taking and where that's hitting on your EV. So let's say I'm at the 5F value here. You'll notice I'm shooting all the way down from -2 EV up to +2 EV. So keep that in mind as you'll want to vary that and maybe play around with it for certain scenes. I typically just shoot on a 3F value though. And the next thing that you'll change here is the increment. So right now I'm stepping at values of 1 EV at a time. However, I can change this and I can go higher or lower. See where I can change here by just 1/3 of an EV. or it can go all the way up to 3 EB, so you can get quite a bit of range here. So let's go ahead and set this over to 3F for the number of shots, hit OK. And now when we go here, you'll see in the top right corner there of the screen image that you now have a symbol that says AE bracket 3 out of 3. So you'll notice here, and I'll go ahead and make these shorter shots compared to what I had. If I go ahead and click fire, you'll actually see it now. It's going to go through each one of those as it's firing each of the shots. So at that point, you've now taken all of your bracketed photos. So next, let's jump into a set of photos that I took over this past weekend and go through how to edit these bracketed shots. So taking a look here in Lightroom, let's pick a series of photos here. There were several photo sets out of this that I took, bracketed sets of images. So let's just go ahead and choose this one for starters. What you'll see here is I'm going to select all 3 of these. I'm going to right click and then I'm going to go to Photo Merge HDR. So this can be one of the quickest ways to just produce an HDR image within Lightroom. So there we go. That was a pretty quick transition over just to a sample of it. Deghosting amount, depending on how much movement you have in the photo, you may want to go to low, medium, or high. I'm going to go to low just to see what happens here within this flowing water. And it'll build that preview. And then the other settings that you want to check out here, you can turn the auto settings on and off. I like to just sometimes start with them. And then auto align is just going to take all 3 photos and make sure that they're aligned together. So let's go ahead and merge these. Let's see how this looks after it finishes merging. You'll see it's running through that HDR up here in the top left corner. And my screen's kind of flickering as it's going through and doing that. And it's just created the HDR and should pop up down here in the carousel view here in just a couple of seconds. Let's see if we can find, there it is. It popped in right there at the right. It's gone through. It looks like it's, aligned all of this pretty well. And now you've got a much higher dynamic range to go through and do your adjustments. Now, the nice thing with the auto settings turned on, it actually sets these in here. So you still have the ability to go in here and make adjustments as you like. So for me, I can tell you this one was just way too blue with the white balance. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that. The other thing that I would probably like to do just from a quick editing technique, if you haven't seen this yet, I like to use linear gradients in most of my photos. And I do have a video that I'll link above that you can check that out if you want to. But we'll just quickly go here. I'll add in a little bit of linear gradient just to make sure that I can darken the sky a little bit so you can see more of the effect. And then I'll also add one in here. Let's do another linear gradient coming in from the bottom. This one I won't darken it quite as much, but really trying to draw the viewer's eye into here where this water's at. And the next thing that I'll go ahead and do here is I want to take a luminance range. Really, I want everything that is... Okay, Lightroom, I've got it. Part of this, so what I want to do here is drop this down a little bit, and then let's see. So what I want to do here is I want to intersect this mask. I want to use a brush here because basically what I'm trying to do is I just want to select this area here as what gets the highlights added to it. So now we've basically got where it's only this water that's getting the additional highlights added. I'm going to add contrast to it and bump the exposure slightly. And I'll probably also adjust the temperature. We might play with that. Maybe not too much. But you can just kind of see there what I was doing with the editing, where my head was at, what I was thinking. Let's go to a slightly different photo. So let's take a look here at another set of images. This is going to be a waterfall that's quite obviously being in the shadows, but you've got a nice bright sunset in the background. So you can see here as I'm going through, the whole scene is getting brighter. So let's go ahead and run an HDR on this. So we'll go to Photo Merge, HDR, and let's see what it pops up with the preview. So once again, though, I'll leave this to auto align, auto settings. And this one's actually going to have some deghosting issues, primarily up here around this tree limb and all of these leaves. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out. So you can already see just within the preview how incredible this photo looks with the HDR, just being able to bring out all of the colors properly. So let's go ahead and click merge and let's see what it comes out looking like. And again, it's just going through here, creating the HDR, and we're just waiting on my computer to finish that out, and we'll get another photo right here. So this is the base photo, so it's pretty awesome looking. It is loading in the preview right now. It actually, to me, handled the movement of the leaves pretty well. It could have been worse. It looks like it handled the waterfall really well also. So really pretty great image there. Let's go ahead and just throw some edits on it, and let's see how it turns out. Because I don't always like exactly how Lightroom auto edits this stuff. I do like dropping the highlights, raising the shadows. We can add maybe just a little bit of clarity here. We're going to go through similarly to what I did in the last photo. We're going to throw a linear gradient in here across the bottom. I'm going to angle this one a little bit to draw the eye to the waterfall. So let's drop the exposure a little bit here. And then I also want to lower the exposure a little bit here in the sky. So let's do the select sky, and it's going to go through detect that. And let's drop this just a little bit. I think that's about right. I don't want it, to be super obvious that I lowered the highlights up there and dropped the overall exposure, but I do want some. And let's go ahead and add in some noise reduction because I don't want the sky to be super sharp. And now let's focus in on the waterfall again. So I'm going to select this as my luminance range. And then as we did in the last one, I'm going to do intersect mask with a brush. And I just want to go through and select all of this. So I'm just going through right now and brushing this back in. My computer's obviously having a little bit of trouble handling that, but that's okay. Let's just get that brushed back in here. I actually don't want it to select this rock back here because I'm really just trying to bring out the contrast in the waterfall. So now let's go take a look at this. Let's bump the exposure up slightly. That's probably too much, but just to get that nice milky white look in it. Let's also bump up the contrast here. And let's see if we can drop some of the blacks that are within it. I don't know if it's really picking up too many blacks, probably not. And we can add in, I kind of want it to have a little bit more yellow look. I think that's actually really cool looking because it seems like you can see the reflection still just within the movement of the water. So just kind of an idea there of what you can do with it. This is all HDR. I'm a huge fan of that where you adjust the sky separately. There's other techniques that you can use using luminosity mask over in Photoshop, similar technique, but this is just a quick way of how you can do it in Lightroom and also how you can go about editing your bracketed images that you just took. Now that you know how I edit my bracketed images, if you want to see more about why I love the Nikon Z8 for landscape photography, you'll want to check this video out here.